Good evening, I'm Jose Cardenas. We'll talk about the contempt of court hearing against Sheriff Joe Arpaio and find out the history behind Arizona's first Boys and Girls Club and what is being done to further help kids involved in the organization. All this coming up on Horizonte.
Funding for Horizonte is made possible by contributions by the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station.
Thank you for joining us. Sheriff Joe Arpaio took the witness stand this week in his ongoing civil contempt hearing. This follows days of testimony by his top deputy, Jerry Sheridan, and his former defense attorney, Tim Casey. The sheriff and 4 others are facing civil contempt of court charges for violating a federal judge's orders in a long-standing racial profiling case. Joining me to talk about the hearing is Paul Charlton, former U.S. Attorney for Arizona and a partner in the law firm of Steptoe and Johnson. Also here is Steve Gallardo, Maricopa County Supervisor for District 5. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us on Horizonte.
Thank you.
Paul, the last time you were on the show, it was kind of an interregnum. We were waiting for a decision by the Court of Appeals on whether Judge Snow should be recused or should have recused himself, and waiting for the next set of hearings to get underway. Give us a kind of a quick overview of what's happened since.
Joe Arpaio's lawyers appealed, as you said, to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal, asking that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals remove Judge Snow because they believed Judge Snow was no longer fair and impartial. And the Ninth Circuit disagreed. They denied Joe Arpaio's motion to remove Judge Snow, so the hearings have begun again. And as you pointed out, we've now heard from Jerry Sheridan and, surprisingly, from Joe Arpaio's own former lawyer, Tim Casey, and now Joe Arpaio himself. And
that's as of Wednesday. That's kind of what we've heard so far. I want to come back and get some details about what's taken place so far. But Supervisor Gallardo, you've been very vocal about what's been going on. In the introduction, we talked about this long-standing profiling case. It's long and it's been very costly.
Yes, not only costly. We have a sheriff's office that's in disarray right now. You have the top commanders and the sheriff right now in court. Who's running that sheriff's office? That's my question. And also, you have a sheriff's office that has a huge problem with lack of not only respect but trust from the community. And that's any law enforcement officer will tell you, you have to have some type of respect and trust from the community. On top of that, we have a very expensive case. It is costing the taxpayers of Maricopa County hundreds of millions of dollars, and we need to put a stop to it. The fact is, you look going back to day one from the sheriff taking office, we're spending over $100 million on settlements, lawyer fees. Melendez itself is nearly $50 million and growing, and that's only over the last 2 years. At what point do the taxpayers and Maricopa County say enough's enough? We need to stop the bleeding. We need to stop the spending that the sheriff's office is costing the taxpayers of Maricopa County. Think about it, Jose. What could we do with $100 million? What could we do in terms of services to the people of Maricopa County? The problems we can address with $100 million, instead it's going to settlements and attorneys. It's ridiculous.
Well, what can be done, though? These costs have already been incurred. You've got more costs that are going to be incurred, and the county is not in a position to simply pull back and not provide a defense for the sheriff. So what, as a practical matter, can you, the citizens of Maricopa County, do about these expenses?
As a member of the County Board of Supervisors, we have a fiduciary responsibility. We have a fiduciary responsibility to look over the budget of the sheriff's office. We need to hold him accountable. We need to start looking at his budget. We need zero-based budgeting on his office. We need to have an account of every dollar being spent. No taxpayers' money should be used for retribution. No money should be used to investigating a federal court judge or any other political official. Let it be a Superior Court judge, a federal judge. This has to stop. The fact is that he is costing the taxpayers of Maricopa County hundreds of millions of dollars. It has to end. Just in the last 2 years on this case alone, nearly $50 million, and we anticipate that to double. I mean, it is unknowing exactly how much it's going to cost the taxpayers of Maricopa County. It has to stop. I think we can hold him accountable on his budget. We should have him come into the county board's office and tell us exactly how he is spending every nickel. We need to stop wasting taxpayer dollars, and we need to stop spending that money on retribution and false investigations of public officials.
So, Paul, in terms of something coming to a stop, this hearing is focused solely on contempt of court charges, and as I understand, the real issue is whether it's civil or criminal, and really not whether it's civil, but whether it is criminal.
Joe Arpaio's lawyers, in an early tactical move, decided that they would come before Judge Snow and admit that they had not followed Judge Snow's orders, that they were in contempt of court, but they wanted it to be civil contempt. They wanted to pay a fine, they wanted a new order, but they didn't want criminal contempt proceedings. Now we've heard more evidence that I think will eventually, if the judge so decides, support a criminal prosecution. The judge has the option of taking this information and referring it to the U.S. Attorney's Office and asking them to prosecute this case. One of the things that the Supervisor Gallardo just mentioned too, Jose, that I think is very important, the metric for the amount of money that have been spent for all the lawyers, for all the costs in these different trials and different payments that we, the taxpayers, have had to make are significant. But there's an important point that you made that I want to underscore as a former individual who had a leadership position within law enforcement. There are deputies out there right now who are looking to Joe Arpaio, an individual who's no longer at the helm. He's in court. His chief deputy, no longer at the helm, he's in court. This is an individual who the judge has found violated the United States Constitution. If you don't have good leadership at the top of law enforcement, the law enforcement agency itself suffers, and that's a very important point that I wanted to underscore.
Well, I want to come back to that because I also want to talk about the role of the county attorney's office. But the legal test that we're looking at here, what is it? Is it whether the sheriff and the other people who are involved in this contempt hearing willfully disobeyed the court's order?
The law seems to suggest that all Judge Snow needs to find is that there's probable cause to believe that Joe Arpaio, or perhaps Jerry Sheridan and others, willfully violated his order. And if that's true, then he can refer it to the U.S. Attorney's Office for a potential prosecution. And we've heard recently evidence that might support such a conclusion.
So let's start with Jerry Sheridan. What did he say that you think would support such a finding?
One of the things that Jerry Sheridan said when he testified was that he didn't recall any information that he had seen or reviewed that indicated that there was an investigation relating to wrongdoing by Judge Snow. In fact, what he admitted on the stand, perhaps as recently as Wednesday and Tuesday, was that he had seen such information, that an individual by the name of Montgomery in Washington State had been hired by the sheriff's office, paid by his own testimony up to $250,000, and that there was information there that they were using or reviewing that indicated that Judge Snow falsely, this information was not accurate, Judge Snow had been working cooperatively with the Department of Justice. We've also heard from Joe Arpaio's former lawyer, surprisingly, who said that he had advised Joe Arpaio how it is he should comply with Judge Snow's orders, and that one of the reasons that Tim Casey, Joe Arpaio's former lawyer, no longer represents Joe Arpaio is because he felt Joe Arpaio was not following that advice.
So there's a basis, you think, right now for the judge to make a finding or that would be a basis for referring this to the U.S. Attorney's Office?
We've certainly heard more information than we had available to us in the past.
Supervisor Gallardo, focusing specifically on the question of monies paid to this gentleman Montgomery from Washington. What could the supervisors do specifically about that, either now or just as a basis for taking action in the future regarding the sheriff's budget?
You know, again, it goes back to how he's spending the money. At the beginning of this particular court case, it was mentioned that possibly RICO dollars were used in order to pay for this investigation.
And we're talking about monies that the sheriff's office collects from criminal defendants involved in racketeering. Exactly.
I believe that we need to have a full account exactly how much money do we have in the RICO fund, exactly how it's being spent. It is under control of the county attorney's office. So if the sheriff wants money for the actual RICO expense, he has to go to the county attorney's office. County attorney's office will then write him a check so he can pay for whatever investigation. I believe we need a full accounting of what's in the RICO fund and how it's being spent. I think we owe it to the taxpayers of Maricopa County to have that type of a fiduciary look. I think it's required. And I also believe that should this be referred to by the judge for a criminal investigation, absolutely no taxpayers' dollars should be spent in order to defend the sheriff or anyone who is found to be under investigation on the criminal side. It's one thing to defend the sheriff and his officers on a civil side, but once you've been found that you has possibly violated a law criminally, I think you are on your own and no taxpayer dollars should be used to defend you. I believe the sheriff should be held accountable. I believe the sheriff should be investigated and let the chips fall where it may. But taxpayers should not have to pay for it.
Paul, as you've indicated, it's highly unusual that a lawyer would testify. I think all of us, lawyers and non-lawyers alike, assume that anything you say to your lawyer, which Tim Casey was for the sheriff, is confidential and nobody can get at it. How did that happen here?
Well, as you know, it's a bad day for any lawyer when that lawyer is testifying about his client, and that's a worse day for that client. Here, one of the reasons Judge Snow felt that it was permissible that Tim Casey testify about statements he would otherwise have had protected that he made to Joe Arpaio was because Joe Arpaio had indicated that one of the reasons he wasn't complying with Judge Snow's order was because of advice he had received from his lawyer. Advice of counsel is a defense, but once you raise that defense, you waive the attorney-client privilege, and so Mr. Casey is now compelled to testify about thoughts and words that he shared with Joe Arpaio.
And he said, as I understand it, that he told the sheriff, you have to comply, and that the sheriff basically said, at least at certain points in time, I'm not going to do that.
That was one of the reasons that he said he had to actually withdraw from his representation of Joe Arpaio because he felt that Joe Arpaio wasn't compliant with the advice that he was giving him.
Now, specifically as it comes to the matter of payments to this Montgomery fellow, there were discussions that the sheriff had with his lawyer. Give us a summary of that testimony.
One of the discussions, an important discussion that Tim Casey testified about, was that there was a point in time in which Tom Liddy, who is the deputy county attorney, Tim Casey, who was Joe Arpaio's lawyer, both of whom who were there, were presented with what purported to be evidence of this conspiracy between Judge Snow and the Department of Justice against Joe Arpaio. That's since been found to be untrue. There was no such evidence. And Tim Casey and, according to Tim Casey's testimony, Tom Liddy both recognized that it was untrue. What isn't clear, but what should be made clear, is what, if anything, those lawyers did to stop that investigation at that point in time. It's a lawyer's job to say yes, but it is also a lawyer's job, and a more difficult job, to say no. And someone, perhaps the county attorney, should have been saying no.
And we have a sheriff, Jose. We have a sheriff right now that has a reputation of going after his political enemies, let it be elected officials, let it be a Superior Court judge, and now federal court judge. So it isn't this is like the first time. I think that should have been the first red flag. I think the county attorney's office should have stepped in and said, wait a minute, enough's enough. We've seen this, we've gone through this, we've gone down this road over and over again. We are not going after a federal judge without any evidence. And that's unfortunate that this case, $250,000, was spent on a gentleman that should have never been hired. Mr. Montgomery should have never been hired, but the county attorney's office did not intervene. That's an unfortunate part.
Well, and Paul, how do you respond to that? Because the fact is that the U.S. Attorney's Office, well after your tenure there, purported to have investigated the sheriff for abuse of power, and it would include the kinds of things that the supervisor is talking about, going after political enemies or people he presumed to be enemies, including other judges on the Maricopa County Superior Court. And at the end of the day, they gave him a slap on the wrist and said, you need to promise not to violate anybody's constitutional rights again. What's going on there? That
was a disappointing aspect of the settlement that the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division reached with the county attorney's office. They made him promise never to punish his political enemies again or investigate political enemies again. That's hardly a punishment for Joe Arpaio. We don't know why the Department of Justice agreed to settle the case in that fashion. And as an individual, as you know, who represented Don Stapley, former supervisor who was a target of that political investigation and persecution by Joe Arpaio and Andrew Thomas, I'm disappointed that the Department of Justice didn't pursue those allegations more strenuously.
Supervisor Gallardo, as a practical matter, what can the Board of Supervisors do beyond perhaps tightening up on the sheriff's budget? I mean, what can you do to deal with all the concerns that you've raised?
You know, and the unfortunate part is we're not even close for this being resolved. The fact is that if the sheriff was to go away tomorrow, I think we're still on the hook of many different claims out there. We're still on the hook of having a federal monitor, which I believe their role will be expanded, and their term there at the county is going to be expanded or extended as well. I think we're not done with the monitor as well. But I think we have a responsibility to make sure that the sheriff is doing his job. I think we have that responsibility. The fact that you have a sheriff that's doing a lot of activities that are not his responsibility and continue to cost taxpayers millions of dollars, I think that falls on the laps of the county supervisors. We need to make sure he's doing his job. If he's not doing his job, we need to yank those dollars away from him. Because if he continues to go down this road, continue to do the types of activities that he's doing, it's just going to cost the taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. There is no end in sight, and that's the unfortunate part. I mean, I think that's the important thing. Taxpayers have to realize it's not the sheriff that's paying for this. I mean, you have attorneys now that are having to have legal representation. You know, it's not the
so the bills keep adding up.
Exactly. It is the taxpayers. It's you, I, and the hundreds of thousands of taxpayers in Maricopa County that are having to pay for this.
Paul, last question, and we're almost out of time. The sheriff did take the stand late in the day Wednesday. Give us a sense for what he said and what you expect to hear and when we think this is all going to wrap up.
If past his prologue, Jose, I don't think we're going to expect much from Joe Arpaio. Joe Arpaio is very artful in his forgetfulness. He's very artful in his inability to take responsibility for any wrongs that take place within the sheriff's office. He has two personas, it appears. One that is a very public, in-charge kind of person, and then another individual who under oath indicates that he's not that person at all.
Sunshine is the best disinfectant, Jose.
Well, in the meantime, the costs continue to rise and the proceedings go on. I'm sure we'll be talking to both of you again about this case. Thank you so much for joining us on Horizonte.
To find out more information about what's on Horizonte, go to azpbs.org and click on the Horizonte tab at the top of the screen. There you can access many features to become a more informed Horizonte viewer. Watch interviews by clicking on the video button or by scrolling down to the bottom of the page for the most recent segments. Learn about more specific topics like arts and culture and immigration. You can also find out what's on Horizonte for the upcoming week. If you would like an RSS feed, a podcast, or you want to buy a video, that's all on our website too. Other features include our collection of website links and a special page for educators. While you're there, show your support for Horizonte with just one click. Discover all that's on Horizonte. Visit azpbs.org, Horizonte today.
When you want to be more connected, friend us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, watch us online.
The Boys and Girls Club Alumni Association is raising money to support young men and women who are members of the Boys and Girls Club of Metropolitan Phoenix. Joining me to talk about the association is Henry Olea, president of the Boys and Girls Club Alumni Association, and Victor Hernandez, board member with the association. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us on Horizonte.
Thank you for having
Henry, you're not only the founder of the Alumni Association, you're basically one of the founding members of the Boys Club, because that's what it was originally. It wasn't Boys and Girls until 1990. But of the original Boys Club in Phoenix, Arizona. That's
Correct.
what, back in 1946 or something?
1946.
And we've got some pictures we want to show. Show what a handsome young boy you were at the time. The first one is a picture of you and a couple of other buddies. Which one are you in that picture?
That's me on the right.
And then
Raimundo Bracamonte is on the left, and Hector Martinez in the center. The Boys Club at one time used to go out and get sponsors to send kids to camp, and we went to the YMCA camp for 10 days.
And you were some of the first ones. We got another picture of I think it's a film session. There's a projector in the back. This is about the same time period as well, right?
Correct.
And where are you in that picture? You're the guy with the gum?
I'm right there with the chew gum and the guy next to me is Johnny Ramos. He was from the welfare. My aunt used to bring in welfare kids that stay at the house. And there's quite a few other people in the picture, very well known. And they used to have movies, and we used to go to the movies there at the Boys Club.
And then our last picture is one that actually has a lot of significance and meaning. And this is one of the activities that the boys would engage in. It's a boxing match.
Yes.
And you're not one of the boxers, but you're the guy in the back with your arm up, right?
Yes, my hand up. Chuck Flores is one of the boxers who watch refereeing them, but the Boys Club had an exceptionally good boxing club, and we used to compete with the boys from the Golden Gate and also from the West Side Boys Club and the other areas from the Madison Park. And we traveled quite a bit around the city.
Well, and you specifically became quite the boxer, Golden Gloves champion in regional areas and so forth, and then eventually a professional boxing career.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Just,
I held the title here as a Golden Glove champion for 3 years in the lightweight division. And then in 1959, I turned professionally after fighting in the national competition in Chicago, Illinois.
Where you ran across a young boxer at the time named Cassius Clay, I understand.
Yeah, Cassius Clay was fighting light heavyweight in 1959. And then in 1960, again, I won enough tournaments to be eligible to fight in the nationals. And then he fought as a heavyweight then.
Well, I want to come back and talk about the impact beyond boxing that the Boys Club had on your life. But before I do that, Victor, you were a member of the club, not the same vintage as Henry, but tell us about your involvement.
Yes, I went to the Keykefer, which is off of 6th Avenue Southern and 66, 67. And it was somewhere for us to hang out. You know, that's, I guess, where we kind of grew together, and I got to meet a lot of our kids. And the Boys Clubs are very diverse, so that's the plus that I really enjoyed about the Boys Club. But when I was invited to attend one of these meetings later on, you know, because once I left, you know, I just forgot about the Boys Club. But when I was invited by these gentlemen from the 46, 47 group, plus my father-in-law was an original member also, I attended one of their meetings. And then once I heard their meeting was going on, and I kind of felt and I saw the passion that they had. And right there at that moment, I said, you know what? Sign me up. I want to become a Boys Club alumni member. And then before you know it, I just got involved with the board, and I'm helping them out raise money, funds for the kids. And
we want to talk about some of the functions you guys are doing, but before I do that, the organization was the Alumni Association, something you founded, got started with some meetings in the, late 70s?
Yeah, 1977, the first reunion I had after accumulating a tremendous amount of names and addresses and phone numbers of members that I knew back in 1946. And at the moment, we have 252 people on our rosters that we mail out invitations to our reunion.
And among the things you do is hold fundraisers to support the ongoing work of what is now the Boys and Girls Club.
Correct. We sponsor the dental program, and we donate quite a bit of money there. And we also, the Christmas program, every Boys Club, there's 13 of them, and we donate over $200 each for a Christmas party for each Boys Club. And we do a tremendous amount. I think the last time we did about $4,500 for the dental program for the kids, and then we sponsor.
You got another event coming up on October 10th. Mariachi Cervantes is going to be performing.
Yes.
So let me ask you, Victor, in the time we have left, give us a kind of a sense for what Boys and Girls Clubs are doing these days. How big are they? And I know there have been a lot of changes. We got about a minute left.
Yes, I know. Right now, currently, there's like 13 Boys Clubs in the Metro Phoenix with a dental clinic, as Leakey has mentioned. And also, on an annual basis, I hear that there's about 24,000 kids that go through the doors of the Boys and Girls Club. And out of that 24,000, there's like 280,000 meals that are served annually to these kids.
So it's still making a big difference in a lot of lives of young people. And one of the things you and I talked a little bit off camera, and just want to touch on this quickly, is it's even more diverse than it was before, and it's serving not only Latino kids and Anglo kids and black kids, but a lot of immigrants from countries other than Mexico.
Yes, we were at a ribbon cutting on September 23rd. We just opened up a new, the Boys Club just opened up a new, Boys and Girls Club just opened up a new club with an administration office. And at that speech, I heard at that school, Balt School in that area, there's like 24 different languages spoken in that area. And I was just amazed. I said, wow, I didn't realize that.
And I just want to touch on this before we run out of time. The Youth of the Year is a young woman from?
Sierra Leone, Africa.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
And what you guys are doing is great, and we really appreciate you joining us on Horizonte to talk about it. Congratulations on all your work.
Thank you for having us.
And that is our show for tonight from all of us here at Horizonte and your Arizona PBS station. Thanks for watching. I'm Jose Cardenas. Have a good evening.
Funding for Horizonte is made possible by contributions by the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station.